Okay, good morning. We are now live streaming on our YouTube channel. We are pretty close to having a quorum. We'll go ahead and confirm that we do have a quorum. When I announce your name, please confirm that you are here. I'm going to go in order. So Paul Gerard sitting in as alternate for Matt Zabel.
Here.
Dana Brown.
Here.
Tony Royster.
Here.
I think I see Holly Wolcott.
Here.
And then Dave Sanders.
Present.
Marlene Fonseca.
Here.
And I see Gavin Kuhn sitting in for Chris Hannon.
Here.
Is there any JLMBC member who's attending who I did not call?
Yeah, this is Gary from Ashley.
Gary, thank you. Anyone else? All right, then we have 4 labor members and 4 management members. Mr. Sanders, you could start the meeting if you chose to choose.
Okay, we're calling the meeting to order at 9:03, I believe. And we've done the roll call and we called meeting to order. So let's go with public comment next. Are there any, Paul?
At this time, anybody who's attending by phone can make a public comment. To make a public comment, please unmute yourself by pressing *6 and announce yourself at this time. Hearing no public comment.
Okay.
Hearing no public comment at this time.
Thank you, sir. No comments. We'll go to action item number 3, committee report for chairperson election. Again, Paul, you'll facilitate that.
Yep, I'll take this one. So with Wendy's Macy's departure, sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Yep. Okay. Sorry. So I'll take this one for.
I can hear you. It's good.
We can all hear him, Stephen.
So I'll go ahead and continue if you can hear me. With Wendy Macy's departure as our general manager last month, we do have a vacancy as he was sitting in the chair position. So we do need to take elections for the chair.
Anybody?
I think it must be Stephen's end. Stephen, we can hear him clearly. Maybe on your end.
Yeah, this is City Attorney. I can hear Paul very clearly.
So we do need to fill the chair position. Under our bylaws, the chair position in an even year is a management member. So we do need to take a nomination for a management representative. And so we can facilitate that election at this time if there's a nomination.
I nominate Dana Brown.
I'll second. Marlene.
Third.
Mr. Sanders, any further discussion, or would you like to go forward with the vote?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were facilitating the whole process. Yes, if there's no other nominations, let's make the call.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and we'll go through the same order as listed on the agenda. So we'll start with Paul Gerard sitting in for Matt Zabel.
Yes.
Matt votes aye. Dana Brown.
Yes.
Dana votes aye. Tony Royster.
Yes. Yes.
Tony votes aye. I did see Matt Rudnick come in. So Matt Rudnick.
Good morning. Yes. Aye.
Holly Wolcott.
Yes.
Matt votes aye and Holly votes aye. David Sanders. That's a yes. Dave votes aye. Marlene Fonseca.
Aye.
Marlene votes aye. Gary Glaze.
Aye.
Gary votes aye. And Gavin Kuhn sitting in for Chris Hannon.
A resounding aye.
Gavin votes aye. It's unanimous. The motion passes.
Good. Now that that's completed, we'll turn the rest of the meeting over to the new chair.
All right.
Wow.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I look forward to serving in this capacity. So we can move on to item 4, the committee report 22-07, AB 361, update and resolution adoption. This is a recommendation that the JLMBC adopt the attached resolution and fine pursuant to section 54953 E1B through C of the California Government Code as amended by Assembly Bill 361, that due to the ongoing COVID-19 state of emergency, the COVID emergency proclaimed by the governor on March 4th, 2020, conducting JLMBC meetings in person without continuing to provide a teleconference and/or video conference option for the JLMBC members and the public would present imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees.
I'll engage a motion to adopt, as this is an ongoing matter. We do this pretty much every month now as a requirement, but I'll make a motion to approve item number 22-07. Gavin, 501.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So Paul, do you do the vote or do I do the vote? I do the vote?
No, I can do the vote if you want me to.
Yes, do the vote, please.
Okay, then we'll go ahead with the same order as we did before. So Paul Gerard sitting in for Matt Daybell.
Aye.
Paul votes aye. Dana Brown.
Aye.
Dana votes aye. Tony Royster.
Aye.
Tony votes aye. Matthew Rudnick.
Aye.
Matt votes aye. Holly Wolcott.
Aye.
Holly votes aye. Dave Sanders.
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Marlene Fonseca.
Aye.
Marlene votes aye. Gary Glaze.
Aye.
Gary votes aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And Gavin Coogan sitting in for Chris Hannon.
Aye.
Gavin votes aye. And I apologize, I just realized I was not sharing my screen. And there we go. And Gavin votes aye. It's unanimous, the motion passes.
Outstanding. Okay, so moving on to our informational items. Item number 5, benefit provider presentation, LifeWorks. This is a presentation from LifeWorks regarding the 2022 open enrollment debrief, services performance, and service improvement plan. I'm assuming we have a representative from LifeWorks.
Steve Murphy with
Yeah,
Siegel.
well,
I'll introduce the LifeWorks presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Paul, you've got control, is that correct? Perfect. Okay, so here's a kind of one-page exhibit to provide an overview of the LifeWorks summary, which is meant to review the activities associated with the 2022 open enrollment period. So we used a SWOT analysis to kind of provide the highlights. From a strength perspective, the city's online enrollment exceeded 80%, which puts you kind of in line or at benchmark with employers of similar size. And the call center performance compared to 2021 improved dramatically. And that's really attributable to a number of factors, including additional staff that LifeWorks added and new technologies that were made available to membership. From a weakness perspective, while the majority of members that use the LifeWorks call center reported to have a satisfactory experience, the percentage of those that reported to be dissatisfied continues to increase, albeit slightly, since 2020. So I think that's an opportunity for LifeWorks to focus on. In terms of kind of immediate opportunities, their performance relative to the negotiated performance standards has continued to improve. From our observations, there are a couple of areas where I think that they tend to kind of slip, and that's primarily around open enrollment. So in the fourth quarter and the subsequent first quarter, trying to do a backlog of issues has kind of resulted in some slippage in performance, but overall, they've done much better than what they have in the past. And then from a threat perspective, I'll say this because we know we're doing a medical RFP. Historically, the city has a passive open enrollment, and in this year, 2022, as well as in prior years, maybe 25% of eligible participants make an active election or change. If there were to be a significant change in plan design or a new vendor added, then we would see a tremendous higher volume of activity, so that LifeWorks would need to staff for that appropriately so that they could manage the activity and service the program effectively. So in a high-reaching overview, that's our summary of the LifeWorks report, and we'll turn it over to the LifeWorks team to complete the presentation.
Thank you, Stephen. And I'll introduce myself. I'm, for those of you that haven't met me, I'm Kevin Canoe, and I'm Vice President of Administrative Solutions at LifeWorks and responsible for the City of Los Angeles account. And we also have Tanya Colley. We're going to be co-presenting today. She's the Director of Administrative Services, and she is the person that handles the day-to-day administration of the city's plan and her team. Paul, if you want to move ahead a couple slides, please. So we won't go through each of these bullet points, but we just wanted to call out a few key highlights of the 2022 enrollment that we just completed, with a focus on the top section, which is there were a number of enhancements introduced. First of all, we introduced the automated virtual assistant, Ava, which is really essentially a chatbot where people can ask questions, general plan information, and then it learns and we update it, and it allows members to self-serve 24/7, which is kind of a neat feature that was launched this year. Not a lot of high utilization, but this will become important as we talk about the next enrollment period. We also made some enhancements to our voice routing system, and you'll see the results of some of those enhancements of how we route calls by our performance results for annual enrollment. And then there was a number of activities around the personal enrollment worksheets and confirmation statements, and that we mailed them through the end of the year, and some additional communications. And then that was through some of the system and process improvements. The bottom part is really just housekeeping. It's kind of standard what we need to do each year, but we just wanted to call out some of the spending account changes and some of the disability changes that we had. Paul, if you want to proceed, please. Great, thank you. So a lot of activity on this chart, but again, just some key observations that we wanted to share. Again, we won't read all the bullet points, but the city really has their highest enrollment election activity in the last 8 days. It was about 25% for the whole, 50% for that period, and 25% from a time perspective. So it's quite interesting. That is pretty typical for the city, but the volume we saw at the end was high, a little higher relative to our business and similar type clients. We saw a lot of activity on the web this year, which was good, and we have some more detailed statistics we'll walk through. The communications that Paul and the city did with the membership really drove a lot of activity towards the end of enrollment. Specifically on the 27th, we had our highest day. And that was a combination of 10% of the population enrolled, of the members that made a change enrolled in that day. When we look at the flexible spending account and kind of the movement amongst the plans, generally speaking, not a lot of movement, but there was some movement, a little over 0.6%. And there was a decrease in the Anthem Narrow Network plan. And when we look at the breakout in the future, we won't go through all the slides, but Tanya will spend a little bit of time on it. Just mentioned that each of the MOUs, there's a breakout and further in the presentation where each of you all, for your respective groups, can see how the movement occurred. But it was most movement out of the Anthem Narrow Network. And then when we look at the spending accounts, and this is a very similar sized client in a public sector, it's actually another city. You had a significant increase in your flex spending, about a little over 2%, almost, from year over year. But you're still, as a total membership, lower than a similar size client. Again, we saw some movement upwards. That's good, closing the gap. But compared to another client, they're a similar size. You're not seeing as much activity in your flex accounts. Maybe an opportunity to promote them in the future. Okay. Again, a lot of metrics here. You can see trends over the last 3 years. It's nice we're getting a really good segment of what's happening in the system. We are seeing it start to level out, but surprisingly, there was a lot of activity this year. So you were up 2% on your online active enrollments, which was good. And people are using the system to do transactions. What was surprising to us relative, again, to our book of business is we saw a 64% increase in unique users using the system. So that means more, what it's telling us is more people went into the system just to even look at their benefits. Doesn't mean they did anything, but they're using the system. So now we're creating behavioral change to, again, direct people to go to the website and check on their benefits, look at them, and we'll talk about maybe in the future about things we can do to, link to carriers. There's some initiatives around that if the city so wants to do. And most importantly, the system was available and it was performing as expected during enrollment. This is really, as we all know, enrollment's the big show for the city and to the membership, to your employees. It's probably one of the most important events, and having it available is really important. So we were excited about these results. I went through 3-4 slides there pretty quickly. I'll pause there before I turn it over to Tanya to go through the next couple slides. Is there any questions I can answer?
All right, Gavin, I have one quick question. You seeing the enrollment numbers changes, is that pretty typical among other public sector of our size? Just curious if we're being a little unusual. Is that just typical at this time? Just trying to get a general sense. Thanks.
So your enrollment activity as a whole was pretty consistent for an inactive and like what I'll call passive enrollment, where you're not required to do any changes. What we did see is though when your people are enrolling is more towards the end. And as Steve Murphy mentioned, if there are new plans and carriers that drive activity, we're going to want to try to flatten out. And that's slide 4, where you see all the activity kind of ramp up. We're going to want to flatten that out over the period of time, just because, we don't want all the call volumes to come into last week. But I would say is generally speaking, the number of people using the system for a passive enrollment was consistent, Gavin. Okay. Thank you for the question. Tanya, I'll turn it over to you.
Kevin, this is David. I'm sorry, I have a quick question. I don't know which slide it was, but regarding the flex account, I think you said the numbers were low or trending down.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So how are we promoting this? And I know we had talked about this a while back about having a link onto the union's website to assist our members in doing so. I don't know if that ever happened. And can we still do that? And we'd like to help encourage enrollment in the flex plan.
So I can answer some of those, and then I'll let maybe Paul or Stephen from the city join in. So relative to the comparative city size, which again is very similar, your overall percentage of people enrolled is about 1,200 less, and they're really close in size. The good news is that we saw a drop in 2021, but it did spike up pretty good, about 1.5% in 2022, which is good. Now, some of that's going to be pandemic related, Dave, but long story short is I think there's things we can do during the enrollment process, as whether it's webinars to promote the flex accounts and the value of them. But you are lower on a percentage basis, fairly. I don't want to say significantly, but it's it's a couple percentage points lower, and it's about the same size city. So.
And some of the enhancements you mentioned earlier, are those the tools we're going to use to increase it, or are we still working on other?
Yeah, there's things we can do on the member portal we control for the city. There's promotions we can do. We have what's called tile cards. If you all have been in there, we can promote education through that. I think another thing, and again, I don't want to speak, Paul, for you, you may want to jump in here, but when there's webinars or seminars for the annual enrollment, especially this year, if you have changes, because there's going to be a lot more communications, it's getting the value of these programs out there to promote it. And then, if there's ways that we can support linking to the union websites or any other promotional materials we do, absolutely we'd want to participate in that. But Paul, I don't know if you'd want to jump in on any comments on that.
Well, the only thing I'd add would be, education's always been a difficult thing for the LOL program, and this past couple of years with the pandemic and not being able to do in person, switching over to the on-demand, we're still trying to gauge how effective that was and how we can improve with trying to get information out there that's tangible for employees to understand. And so any type of benefit improvement is something we should be looking for or looking towards.
And I'm offering that, and from our side of the house, the union side of the house, we can be helpful in doing that. So whatever materials or a link again on our website would probably be helpful. Well, I know it would be. So if we can look into that, that'd be great.
It's Gavin. I just want to raise, Dave's got a really good point. Thank you for raising that, David. Because I've talked to a couple of my members over the last year about the benefits of it, and they were completely ignorant. So we're not getting the word out. So I think we need to see what we can do a better job. So Maybe they're not reading their emails. I don't know. We got all kinds of special children. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, I think we can move forward, Paul. Tanya?
Okay. All right, thank you, Kevin. So for 2021, the call center metrics improved greatly for OE 2022. As you can see, the call volume themselves went down, but the average time to talk went up. So we were able to continue to help users get through their enrollments. We were able to answer questions, and overall, all of the call center metrics seem to have improved for 2022. Some of that we attribute to, we added some additional call center staff. We did more training. We also changed the method of how we do the mock calls to prepare them from open enrollment. And that seemed to have helped as well. And then we had the support of Paul and his team to help also drive some training materials that we could use with the call center. So that was very helpful. As mentioned by Stephen and Kevin, for 2023, we understand that if there are changes made by the city, we will need to increase our staff again. We will need to do additional training and things of that measure. Paul, if you want to move forward. Okay, here we talk about the survey results. So over 93%.
Tanya, I have a quick question.
Yes.
In the last slide, you said you're partnering with a CBO. Who's the CBO?
Sorry, it's that city benefits office, Dave.
Oh.
Sorry, we were short. We shortened it. We were trying to watch real estate there, but it's really Paul and his team.
Yeah, I have a different definition of CBO. Okay, okay, I got it.
Yeah, and generally speaking, I think one thing to point out there is how we timed communications. I mentioned it earlier was really important because that helped us. And I mean, the stats you speak for themselves. This was a material difference in our performance year over year, and we've really stabilized and gotten to a point where we're creating a much better experience. We're going to talk about satisfaction, and Tanya's going to walk through it. There's some still some continued opportunities here. So Tanya, if you want to walk through this.
So over 93% of the city's membership was satisfied with the service that we provided. However, there was also an increase in dissatisfied participants, and Stephen hinted on that earlier. So what we're doing to mitigate this risk of increasing the dissatisfied members is maintaining the callback process. So one thing that we implemented in 2021 is that anyone who rated as dissatisfied, we did an outbound call to that participant to understand why were they dissatisfied and what we could do differently going forward. So that is a process that we will maintain. And we think that that gives us good data to be able to help the participants through the call center. We continue to do ongoing training. We do have an escalation process that we also go through. So my team works with the call center closely. We have weekly calls with them to go over, opportunities and training topics. Any questions for this slide?
I have a quick question. I know one of the issues is low ratings and the clarity of the answer. Was there a specific category where the information wasn't clear? Do we know that?
I know one topic that both Paul and our teams together are working through is the billing. So direct bills tend to be a question that a lot of people call in to ask about. So we're continuing to categorize, the opportunities and where we're seeing, the most call volume. And we do that also within our quarterly reviews that we do with Paul and his team as well. I'm not sure, Paul, if you have anything additional you want to add there.
Well, the only to add on to that, so the direct bill piece is whenever an employee is on leave or doesn't get enough sufficient hours through payroll, we're billing them separately through the system. And lots of times, just for some background, what happens is an employee works for 10 years, 20 years, no break in service, no break in work, and then in that time period, they forget how benefits work. They forget how this is. So there's a back to basics kind of education issue where employees tend to get frustrated, and they're not necessarily understanding the things that the call center's saying. So it's a difficult kind of conversation to have, and definitely areas where we need to figure out a better way of improving how we're relaying that information.
So is that the information that we're providing to the vendor to provide to the employees?
For the most part, yeah, it is a partnership. The vendor, LifeWorks, can only say so much since they don't have access to city payroll records. But it is information that we're giving to the vendor for them to be able to try to relay the concept and improve it. But it is just that fundamental education issue, trying to make the member who's calling understand the circumstances, which is not separate from a lot of other concepts with enrollment into benefits. Just understanding how benefits work, just understanding how the program works, that basic knowledge.
Okay.
This is Dana. I also think that there's something to be said about sort of the season that we're in, sort of as a country. And so you can see sort of the increased frustration and disgust that people were, where they were in 2019, pre-pandemic, because this was in like what? Oh, well, I guess in October of 19, right? This is open enrollment, and then as we get into the pandemic and we're still in the pandemic, people's just sort of level of patience, what used to be a satisfying answer for me is no longer a satisfying answer because I'm just sort of fed up outside of this. So it'll be interesting to see that when we are in a more sort of regular October, because October has been like a rough month during the pandemic because of the weather and we're starting to, sort of surge and so forth. And so it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like in coming years, just in customer satisfaction, as people are less disgusted with the overall circumstances of our existence, if you will.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add, Dan is right, but I also think that we're talking about a small group of people with a specific set of issues that are different than the normal calls. And maybe some process within the call center can be worked out because the information, according to Paul, is not available to the call center. These individuals are frustrated because they can't get the answers they need. Maybe there's a way to fix that mechanism, or at least make the call center aware for these individuals to further contact someone else to where they can get that information, would alleviate, because at least if there's some instruction to the caller, they feel like they got something out of the call rather than just, I'm sorry, this is the policy, that's all I can do for you. That's not helpful. And I can understand the frustration because the call center has limited powers. Anything outside that scope shouldn't be ignored. It should have a process put in place so that can be passed along to the caller. I just put my 2 cents in the room. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think this relates to the bottom. Some of these comments relate. So one is purely we just have to do some additional training, knowledge. I think the second piece though is on the bottom right. One of the things we're doing is we're dealing with people, and to the point about there's stress, there's the pandemic, there's just work, there's life. One of the things we're working on right now is initiating a significant technology enhancement, and it's called voice sentiment analysis. And probably some of your insurance carriers already use this, but what we're hoping to have by the next enrollment or before then is it'll essentially, while the member's on the call with our representatives, it detects through various algorithms that I'm not smart enough to talk about when a caller is either satisfied or dissatisfied through that mechanism, so we can triage it more, because in some cases, we just didn't provide good service. I'm not here to tell you anything different. There are situations of that. There's situations where maybe we thought we were helping the person, though. We were giving them the information we have, but we weren't reading their cues, that they weren't maybe understanding it. They might have been saying yes, maybe they're saying no. But this sentiment analysis will help us, because then we'll be able to, first of all, at the point of contact, address it, but even after that, look and listen to those calls and review them. So there's really a process around this, but it's going to be on the backs of a lot of training and communication. And Paul's team, and I know our call center team, have been collaborating on trying to get this moving forward. Just the training piece, keeping it ongoing. The other item I point out is relative to our entire book of business. This is within the tolerance we're seeing of satisfaction, like pluses and minuses. We've had a couple that have gone up. We've had a couple that have gone down, but it's in that, 1 to 1.5% range where we've seen movement across the book. The good news is we're still above 90%. We want 100%.
Hi, this is Marlene. I'm sorry, I'm trying to raise my hand. Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Dana and Gavin said, just kind of what I saw going on during this time period, I think may have contributed to it. For example, we had people that had to take leaves of absence and are still on leave of absence for vulnerable conditions and are on unpaid status, probably more than had we not been in the pandemic, they would not be. They'd be coming to work. In addition, folks that were on workers' comp and or non-work comp injuries waiting for surgeries were all pushed off, and they didn't expect to take their whole year of work comp, but they hadn't been able to get their surgery, which led into going on a state rate and then losing their benefits. So I think a lot of that may have contributed to. I saw more than, definitely more than usual circumstances like that during the pandemic. That's all.
Thank you, Marlene. Yep. No, appreciate that input. Yep.
So Kevin, you'll now be able to tell when I call you if I'm stressed or not. Is that what the algorithm will tell you?
It essentially does. It's really neat technology. We're in the process of converting over from our technical Viaphone systems to Amazon Connect, it's called, and implementing that solution. So it'll probably be sometime Q3, Q4. So we're hoping to have it before enrollment, because it allows us to more proactively get to members that aren't satisfied. But yeah, it essentially detects through your voice, your sentiment of how you're feeling.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I've seen some demonstrations of it. It's pretty slick technology. And again, I think a lot of providers are using this. There are some, we're not at the bleeding edge of it, but we're fairly early. I know some of the insurance carriers that we've worked with are using it. I don't know if your carriers are, but it's something that we see coming in the future. Also, these technology enhancements I mentioned will allow us to route calls more efficiently and evaluate reps more efficiently. Because to be very frank and honest, some of our dissatisfaction was as a result of individual performers where they had high volumes of dissatisfied calls and are no longer with the firm, to be very candid.
I'd love to have this technology at home with my teenagers and spouse. Thank you.
Well, we'll keep you updated on the progress of that as we move forward through the year. So I'm sure as we prepare for annual enrollment, we'll have those discussions.
I've seen this in a movie once. I don't know if it turned out well, but okay. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that problem exists with me. I think everybody knows where I'm coming from. So it's pretty clear.
Okay, Paul, if you want to move ahead to the next slide, I'll take this one. So we talked a little bit about AVA, the Automated Virtual Assistant before. AVA is our acronym. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, except for the bottom right corner of the slide. It's essentially a chat bot. You can ask it a question. It'll give you information. It was deployed in September. We had a decent amount of volume. We didn't highly promote it. Whenever we launched something like this, especially with Citi, we did what I'll call more of a soft launch. But really in 2022, there's a couple things we want to accomplish. We want to continue to make sure that it can answer the questions that come in. So there's a process around that. But more importantly, as we get to the next enrollment period, there may be things we can use this tool for, especially because you have a 24/7 workforce, where if they may just have, hey, what's changing in the plan? They can't read it. They don't want to go online, but they want to do it maybe through a chat. You can speak to it into your phone. It'll give you the information back. Again, it's only as good as the information we give it, but this is something we want to consider. And then there's even more that you can do with this. So again, if people have payroll questions, if they need phone numbers, if there's vacation policies that are, that we can get access to, we can integrate that into that in the future, if so be it. But really the most important thing is we go into 2023 potential carrier changes. If that happens, this may be a tool that will help us leverage getting members information or making it at least available to them. So the biggest item of inquiries for the past year or the past few months on this was the benefit change inquiry. So people wanting to know what to do to change or what their benefits are, were the two top categories. So not high volume, but we hope that there will be more of a push. And you can see the spike in October of during annual enrollment, people wanting to know what they had. So it was good to see that usage. Tanya, next few slides.
Okay, so the next few slides are really around migration through plans. So as you can see, and I think this is slides 9 through 12 that will go through the different MOUs. And you can see the movement through plans for your prospective groups. But it looks like the biggest change was people moving out of the narrow plan and into either the Anthem HMO, the Vivity, or the PPO. So that looks like most of the movement that happened overall. So people moving out of the narrow plan. All right, so as I mentioned, the next few slides will just break this out through different groups. So again, it looks like more people moved out of the narrow plan for both groups on this particular slide. And I think we'll see the same for the next few slides as well. So again, the biggest jump from the narrow plan, and again here. Any questions on the MOU details? All right, so we can move forward, Paul. All right, this slide talks about our performance guarantees. And again, this is one where we did make some great improvements based off of feedback that we received last year during this call. We have, for one, I want to just go ahead and call out Q3 of 2021, where we met 100% of our metrics. That was very important to us. We were very happy about that. As Stephen mentioned at the top of this call, we do have a few areas that continue to be a problem area for us, and that's really mostly around communications. And we do have a unique process that we use with the city for communications. That is a non-standard process for LifeWorks, but we are working with Paul and Chong and team to, get to a more standard process that we use. And I think once we get there, you will see the communications metrics start to level out, and we'll start to meet that a little bit more. But we are working together jointly to come up with some improvements in that area. But as you can see, over the course of 2019 to current, we definitely have made lots of improvements in this area. Questions or concerns there? All right.
Okay, we just have a couple more slides we want to get through. And I know we talked about member satisfaction. And again, we covered this, I think, a bit before in the open enrollment debrief, but this is kind of a year over year look. And again, you can see that there was about a 0.5% drop in overall satisfaction. Again, still above the target, but still we want to improve that. And we talked about some of the actions we're taking around that. But we did actually break down on the members we called back. So there were 148 specific people we called back. That was something we talked about in our meeting last year in March, I believe it was. And some of them we didn't get a hold of. Some of them were satisfied when we called their issue had been resolved prior to us calling them back, or we resolved it on that callback. Few of them no longer work for the city, didn't want to engage. Some were just dissatisfied. We couldn't solve they just didn't want to talk anymore about it. And then there were some technology access issues. And I want to just categorize these into two buckets. Some people had issues getting on to the website, or if it was an enrollment process, we were able to sort that through. But in some cases, as you may or may not know, we were obviously work from home. And there have been instances where, internet performance wasn't optimal for our reps, or maybe for the member, but usually it's our reps. And there was, maybe there was a breakage in calls, and that caused the dissatisfaction. Like the call took longer because there was intermittent connectivity, for example. Not a lot, but again, those are things we're addressing, and there's things we've done on our side with our reps, for example, providing alternate hotspots, to make sure that, if their internet goes down or it's performing slowly, they can go to their hotspot, just examples. And then we talked about some 2022 actions that we're taking as a team to make sure what the additional training, the voice sentiment analysis, these are things that are going to be continued. They're just part of our process, but it's something we're really going to emphasize and focus on. And it'll be critical as we go through the plan changes, potentially with the carrier changes, not the plan changes. Okay. And then the last item, just to close out, is we talked about a bunch of items, improvement items from last enrollment. This is a quick update. We completed 7 of the key technology items out there. We talked about the IVR, introduction of automated virtual assistant. I want to call out that we went to a weekly carrier file process. It was at a different frequency for many of the carriers before. I first of all want to thank the carriers we work with and the city benefits team, led by Paul and his leadership team, for helping us navigate that. So going to a weekly process does a couple things. The most important, it ensures that when somebody has a change or has some sort of enrollment event like a new hire, that it's getting to the carrier quickly and that they're not having access to care issues. So this was really a nice process improvement and enhancement that we worked on. And it was truly a partnership. And when, vendors can work together along with the leadership of the city, it shows what we can accomplish. And it may seem simple, but it was a lot of work and we appreciate the partnership. We introduced some password reset functionality to make it easier for members to reset their password. Some projects that are ongoing are work, as Tanya mentioned, the communications and the timeliness, continuing to work on how we enhance that, standardize it. There's talk about, do we need to do videos to assist members in different activities? Could be flexible spending accounts. It could be how to enroll. There's a whole bunch of things that we think can help improve the member experience. But again, we have to prioritize. But those are some of the things that we're continuing to look at and are part of our ongoing cycle. And then there's ones that we're continuing that just honestly require further analysis. Paul mentioned the direct billing. We've talked about single sign-on functionality. There's some challenges and approvals that are required, so we're continuing to work through those. But these are some examples that we have to dig a little bit deeper. They're important, but there's still a lot of work. So really, I think what this is changing to now is we'll continue to provide an update like this. It just really talks about some of the key initiatives and actions we're taking as we move forward when we do these updates. But I think there was a lot of progress on our service improvement, and I think it's really shown in our service performance with how we've improved. And we appreciate the partnership of the city and the JLMBC and demonstrating patience with us, because I think we've improved. So I'll pause there and ask if there's any questions.
Kevin, I have a quick question. I don't know, and maybe I missed it or you had it categorized. Was one of the issues of dissatisfaction, was there a language barrier? Was that one of the problems, people that maybe didn't speak English as a first language? And secondly, where actually is the call center located? Is it local here or is it someplace else?
So 2 questions. No. So just so everyone's aware of, we have Spanish speaking reps on staff. But when we have an alternate language that comes in, we actually have a dedicated language line service that allows us, I think it's like over 100 and something, 200 different languages, where we actually bring in an interpreter in so the person can speak in their native language and translate it to us. So we do offer that service to your membership. So it was not a language issue. One of the things you'll note in the appendix is, you will notice, though, that our English to Spanish speaking talk time, the Spanish speaking talk time was significantly higher in general. But nothing to call out there, Dave. And then I lost track. I didn't write the second question down. I'm sorry.
Your call center location, that here?
Oh, yeah, the call center location. So right now we're virtual.
Okay.
Because of the pandemic. When we come back, we have 3 primary centers. So one is in St. Petersburg, Florida. One is in Pittsburgh. And one is in the Massachusetts area. Primarily, we'll be serviced out of our Pittsburgh location. with some of the virtual reps, obviously.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Well, we want to thank everybody, and I'm just going to have one kind of final comment. In addition to thanking Paul, I know LifeWorks will not have an opportunity to speak again at one of these events, so we just wanted to thank and wish Stephen well and for his support, Stephen M. from the city team. We appreciate the partnership, Stephen, and thank you for the leadership you provided us. We just want to thank you publicly for that. So I don't have anything else. The appendix speaks for itself. There's just a lot of details in there. If there's any questions, you're welcome to route them to Paul or directly to us, and we'll be happy to try to answer them or work with Paul on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin and Tanya. I really appreciated all of that information. It's very interesting just to kind of see how our workforce, sort of responds to the things that we put out there for them. Just kind of gives us another perspective on kind of what's on their mind. So I appreciate that. So moving on to item number 6, which is a committee report 2208, the catastrophic illness program update and draft ordinance. This is a report regarding the draft ordinance for the permanent incorporation of the catastrophic illness program into the ad code.
And I'll take this one, Dana. Thank you. So the committee may remember a year ago, we brought the catastrophic illness program back for discussion, and that was actually a follow-up discussion from a prior meeting. Our catastrophic illness program has been a consistent program since it was first originally piloted back in 1998, if I remember correctly. And but that ordinance authorizing the program did expire. So we made an effort to renew the program and make it permanent by putting it and incorporating it through the Los Angeles Administrative Code. At the time, back in March of 2021, when we talked with the committee, we were answering questions about the program itself and how it would facilitate and how we're writing this ordinance. And we answered those at that committee meeting, but we had to bring forward the ordinance to council, or the action to be able to draft the ordinance to council. That happened in July, and then we worked with the city attorney to draft the ordinance, incorporating all the concerns and questions and items that we talked about with the JLMBC committee. And in this report, we have the draft ordinance available for comment to go over and review before the city attorney completes their drafting of the ordinance and then submits it to council. Within the ordinance itself, the draft ordinance, which is attachment number 3 to this document, we are incorporating the concepts that we talked about in the previous meeting, which is ensuring that the time bank is being used to be able to allow applicants for the catastrophic illness program to be able to continue, and to use that time bank from not donated hours, from hours that are forfeited from employees in the use it or lose it concept. So employees that do not use their vacation time when they reach their allowance maximum, do not use their floating holiday time, those hours are lost and then contributed to the bank. That's how the program has been operating for decades. There's much more than sufficient hours in that program, in that time bank, to be able to allot for this program, and we see no issue or problem moving forward with it. In its current setup. The attachment number 3, which I'll jump to really quick, is the ordinance language itself. So we are asking for, and it's way down at the bottom here, we are asking for comments back from the committee, if there are any comments to be able to put into the ordinance. I'm happy to answer your questions now. We can take comments from committee if there are any, either through this meeting or separately, but this is the opportunity to be able to comment before this item moves forward.
Well, I have a comment just about the process. So this is not an action item that we are going to vote to move forward. It is
correct. This is correct. We already took action with the committee when we move forward to have the item considered in council, as far as being able to have direction to move forward with creating and adopting the ordinance. The instruction from council was for city attorney to submit the ordinance and draft it. So there was no instruction from council for JLMBC to act. And this is consistent with other actions that we've taken in the processes of how we've done ordinances through that relate to the IOL program. That the action that was taken previously to recommend and start the process was the actual action from the committee.
And Paul, if I have comments, you say submit them to you directly, and is there a time period you want this window, or is there an open window?
Quickly, we would like to move forward. I would say probably within the next 2 weeks or so would be when we'd want comments back. We can talk through the ordinance itself now. I think in the matter of time, I was wanting to leave it open, but we can talk through the components of the ordinance in this meeting if the committee would like.
I actually have one more question, and I'm sorry, you know, I wish I would have sort of caught up on this a little bit earlier, but here my 4th day, it seems like 4 years, but it's been only 4 days. So so this essentially just places it in the ad code. It does not change the program as we know it. It just places it in the ad code instead of having it as a program held in the personnel department. Okay.
Correct. So essentially, we have been operating this program without change or anything since we originally adopted it back in 1999 or 98, the 90 year that we started it. There has been no change in our administration of the program since then. This ordinance, as drafted right now, facilitates the continuance of our administration and is written to be able to continue exactly what we're doing today with no change. The only difference in this ordinance being adopted is it will now become permanently written into the Los Angeles Administrative Code. We won't have an expiration date. We won't have to worry about having to address this matter again until there is a change that's requested.
Yeah, I think that my interest in this is that certainly when I was at the CAO's office, this policy has come up a number of times. And, you know, mostly with respect to the rules surrounding eligibility. And so, and I don't necessarily remember all of the things that have come up, but it's like, oh, this is the opportunity. But at the end of the day, I mean, I guess if it's in the ad code, we always have the opportunity to amend the ad code, with good cause. So I just wish I would have been thinking about this earlier. But anyway, I think it's a good idea that it is codified in the ad code. All right.
And Dana and you and I both have 2 weeks to make any changes that we think that are necessary, because we've had this discussion in the union side for a while too. So.
Okay, copy. Thank you.
And it's Gavin. I'm going to review it too, because I appreciate the language draft for make this in the ad code, but I'm always looking for flexibility, because we may have unforeseen changes come down the road, and to make such changes in the ad code is challenging. Let's be honest, not impossible. I always like to build in as much as we can within the framework, any kind of flexibility for the group to adjust. I'll be hypothetical. Maybe it's the hours we think looking at the pattern of the problem needs to be changed, employment changes, you have to go through this process again would be cumbersome. If there's any way to build a little bit of where it makes common sense, flexibility in the process, I always like to build that into what we're doing. So, we're not so rigid. We have no flexibility on adjustment where it makes sense down the road. Because remember, the numbers on this are low. We're talking since 2016, according to your chart, 40 people tops. And this family or employee on this 20 and 20 split. So it's not a significant impact on any, meaning not even a blip on a radar scope, but it is meaningful to these families. So I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to help. Thanks.
So maybe it would.
Go ahead, Paul.
Maybe you're going to say the same thing I was going to say. Maybe it would help if I did give a brief little recap into the current administration and the flexibility and things that we have on the admin side for clarity and refresher. This program is an application program. It is intended for employees as a last resort. So any LA benefits eligible employee who is not eligible to get disability benefits and is exhausted all their sick time, they have no other option. That's when this catastrophic program comes in. And through the administration process of the application, we have a lot of flexibility and a lot of options there in being able to make sure that the employees that need this service are able to get it. We have, and I think it is written in the report, we have not had in any memory of employees in our group in administering this program ever denied anybody who's been an applicant. So it's been a very successful program in its administration to that regard.
Paul, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that there are unforeseen things that we can't see today. And if I'm always looking for flexibility in language where it makes sense, because like I said, if some unforeseen change in the law, who knows what the federal government will do, things happen. We have to go back and revisit the whole can of worms. It's nice if there's some built-in flexibility within the rules. This is what I'm talking about. Sometimes we miss that in drafting language. I'm just putting the general principle things.
Right. I appreciate that too. I think that there is a sworn one that's like this, right? This is just for civilians. And I know that their department, the sworn departments and their labor organizations really like their program. So I don't know. Maybe we can just kind of take a look at them and, see where they line up just to make sure we're offering the, the best case scenario for employees who are at this point. But okay, just commentary. Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul, for that.
Well, I have a quick question, because you say that you had a hard time or you couldn't pull data for all years. I mean, does that bank continue to build every year, or does it roll over into the next fiscal year?
So that's a technical problem that we encountered with the controller. So the controller's way of accounting for that time is there's some difficulty in their current system of going back prior years and accounting for the prior year hour allocation in the current PACER system. In the transition to Workday, I understand there's efforts to be able to make changes towards that accountability, but year after year, what we have seen when we've asked those questions on what that current bank is, because we repeatedly ask that question, there's always a large chunk of hours available in that bank for the current fiscal year when we're asking that.
My understanding was that and I, pretty new to this, but that there ever really wasn't a real bank to begin with.
It's a what's the word? It's a label kind of. It is they can calculate hours. It's a program that they're able to use and say, okay, these are the number of hours lost, but there's not.
Right, but yeah, you're never going to deny somebody. You're never going to deny somebody based on lack of hours, because it's a nominal title.
If I can, I just wanted to make one comment that, the policy issues regarding the program, we did bring that to the JLMBC. And I think also, everything that was communicated to council, I think that council report was brought as well. So to the extent that any modification of the ordinance is actually changing what was represented to council, that may require another trip through council, because the ordinance is really intended to reflect what was recommended in the original report.
Understood. And to just add to Steve's comment, if once it's in the ad code, which is what this is about, putting it the way it is into the ad code, we can always make changes to the ad code when we get approval. So there's probably, even if we want to make changes and we're going to have to go back through council, it probably makes sense just to move forward with this action. And then we can continue to discuss if we want to make changes and then get that approval, subsequently, rather than to hold up this particular action.
Because it's easier to make an amendment versus going through the whole process.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was a lively discussion. Thank you, guys. Everybody cares about this program, so I'm glad it's going to be in the ad code, and employees can see it, and it won't be something that is held at the personnel department. So I think that's great. So assuming there's no other conversation about that, I'm going to move on to item 7, which is a committee report 22-09. LA Well third-party administrator request for proposal.
And I'll start this one off too. So our contract with our third-party administrator, LifeWorks, who is on the call earlier today, expires in March of 2024, 2 whole years away. But surprisingly enough, it is now time to start our RFP process for those services. It takes, because of the nature of an implementation for a record keeper, it takes quite a long time to be able to go through a transition phase if a transition phase is required. So we already started discussion on the TPA RFP, or request for proposals for a third-party administrator service, and we talked with our consultant Siegel about the environment and the atmosphere of these services, and through that we asked them to create a feasibility study, essentially. To let us know a little bit more about the culture and the organizations out there and the services available for a third-party administrator. This is very similar to the actions that we took previously. Our prior record keeper was Mercer, before LifeWorks had been selected as a record keeper moving forward. And we were looking at services and trying to improve services as well. We didn't go as far back then when we had done our last RFP of doing the feasibility study. So the feasibility study is something new. Through that study, Siegel has identified that there are a couple different options that might be feasible for the city to consider in moving forward with a request for proposal. Their feasibility study is identified in the attachment to this report, but I'll just briefly recap. There's 2 main options that they recommend that we can consider. One is continuing the current level of service that we're currently contracting with for third-party administrator services, which is all-encompass comprehensive service, where we are contracting with a third-party administrator to do everything. They provide us with the system, they provide us with the support for the system, they provide us with the call center. They are doing everything for us within that contract. The other option that we can consider is still using a third-party administrator service, but not necessarily contracting with the consultant, with the record keeper to provide all the services. We may opt or choose to be able to only contract with them for certain services or a certain level of services, and then either perform the rest of the administration ourselves or contract out for that administration. The easiest example is a call center piece. If we could, through this request for proposals, identify that we do not want to use the third-party administrator's record keeper's call center service, we could essentially use our own staff for call center. We could contract with a different call center option, but having that flexibility, having that option is something that is feasible, as identified by our consultant Siegel, and something that we're looking into. And I'm not sure if Mr. Murphy, if you had anything else you wanted to add to that concept.
I think at this stage, the intent is to look at the entire kind of universe of options that are available. So as Paul noted, you could do a turnkey solution with someone that provides all the services or carve them up. I think based on this morning's earlier conversation, a good example is direct billing is something that's fairly unique to the city. And so it adds some level of complexity. So again, if someone were very versed in that, then they may be able to address the members' questions and resolve it much more quickly, but there would be some additional costs associated with that in terms of recruitment, retention, training, et cetera, and turnover. So there are elements we're trying to look at that and saying, okay, based on that spectrum, how does that look? But the other idea too of doing the request for information to start is to, one, make sure that the city staff is fully versed in what options do exist out there. And number 2, also give the marketplace an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the city and what makes it unique and what kind of what's hard coded for the city and what could be kind of modified, so that when they do participate in the RFP process, they're much more prepared.
So we are looking forward to these 2 models and trying to understand the benefits versus the cost considerations. And as Steven mentioned, we're going to be recommending or moving forward with issuing an RFI to gather more information from the industry to understand the options that are out there. And very similar to our process from 5 years ago when we had gone out to RFP for selecting LifeWorks, who is then Morneau Chappelle. We're looking for these really in the guise of improvement. We're wanting to make sure that we're looking towards the customer and we're improving the ability and access of services to our members. So the next step in our process is to issue this RFI, this request for information, to understand what's available in the industry, what's out there that can help us improve the level of service that we're trying to give to our members, improve the product that we're offering, improve the customer experience, and help us build this request for proposals as far as our scope of services and what we're asking for vendors. Then we're planning to release that RFP for third-party administrative services later this year, with the ultimate goal of trying to make a decision and contract with a vendor by the end of this calendar year so that we can start the implementation process. If we go through a change in any type of function, even if it's a change in just this concept of contracting, even though we could still have the same vendor providing us the system, but we might have different enhancements, different services related to that system as part of this request for proposal. So it is a substantial amount of work and effort that's going to be needed through this process. We will be coming back to the JLMBC with the RFP once it is developed, and that will be a discussion and action item at that time. But at this time, the RFI is just an educational, informational concept that we're implementing to be able to develop the RFP.
Well, Stephen, I'd like to...
Any questions?
Well, I was going to just say that I think that it's outstanding that you guys are, forward thinking and getting to this very early. And I'm glad that, even though the launch, the go live is not for a couple years, it's important to be able to have enough time to complete this process. So I'm glad that you guys are jumping on this early.
And Paul, to Gavin, I think it's a great idea to be looking at all the models, throwing it out there and see what's available. But I just caution because I have sat on other plans where we have bifurcated services into different groups, and we in past experiences, there's been communication failures, which actually compounded ultimately the service element. And so we got to be very careful when you start opening that door on how that piece is structured so we don't miss something. And, although it may look better on paper, practical application was a disaster. And so I'm very cautious on, movement of that because our members call in, rely on these services. And if we have further disruption, it's a nightmare. I'll just be honest with you. And so, careful what you wish for is kind of thing. So I think I applaud you for looking at what's out there, what's available, ways to improve the process. It shouldn't just be cost driven. It really should be also service driven. So I'll leave it at that. That's my few comments. But anyway, thanks for the update.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. So unless there are any more comments, seeing none. By seeing, I mean, nobody's raising their hand because this virtual thing is something to get used to. Okay, so seeing none, we will move to our item number 8, Committee Report 22-10, the Health Plan Services Request for Proposal Update. Paul, I assume it's you as well.
I'm going to kick this one off again.
All right. Thank you.
So as the committee remembers from January, we brought the health RFP forward with our changes and our recommendations for splitting the health RFP into 2 different requests for proposals. One for the network plans RFP services, which are our carrier that contracts with locations and doctors to provide services, and the other one being the staff model, the inclusive, where the carrier and the doctors are the same company. We issued both of those RFPs recently. Actually, we'll get that to the timeline, but this update is actually an update to talk about the process and our review committee and our next steps moving forward. So first, with the review committee itself, we have received our names for both the labor and the management members who are going to serve with the review committee rating panel. So Shauna Janeway was designated as the labor representative, and Paul Weber was designated as a management representative. We're moving forward with the review committee and making our next steps in getting everybody ready and prepared to receive proposals. We're holding orientation meetings with the review committee, getting them ready and understanding of all the components involved within the health arena, with the evaluation process itself, and all the duties and requirements required for them over this next period of time. That is all going to be held in multiple sessions from between now and April 1st. Our next process in moving forward with the health RFP, since both of them have been released, we're waiting for those responses to come in on April 14th and March 31st. The review committee will be actively evaluating everything that comes in and and pointed to be able to have initial findings come back to the JLMBC at committee meeting in May, the first meeting in May. After the first meeting in May, or actually coming up soon, we'll be talking with the JLMBC and recommending whether or not the JLMBC would like to hold interviews. Just as a reminder on the process itself, we have taken out the part of the evaluation period where we interview a vendor itself as part of the evaluation, but it's still an option for the JLMBC to do interviews if so desired. If the JLMBC does desire, which we'll talk about in a future meeting once we have the initial recommendations available, we will be able to schedule those interviews, all in the guise to be able to adopt the full plan by June. And I do see Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, on your calendar, the March 1st event, that was the bidders conference. Is that what that means? Pre-proposal.
Correct. So the mandatory pre-proposals, which were one was held on Tuesday of this past week, and one is going to be held Tuesday of the 15th. Those are both the mandatory pre-proposal conferences where we talk about the compliance requirements with each vendor to make sure that they're successful in understanding and knowing what they need to do. That's what those two dates are.
And on the one on March 1st. Can you tell me who the vendors were who attended?
Yeah, we had 4 vendors attend that meeting. I think I'm okay in saying who they were. We had Aetna, Anthem, United Healthcare, and Blue Shield attend.
Blue Shield. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so our next, oh yes.
Go ahead.
So our next step through this process will be for us to meet and continue with the review process with the review committee, and we'll be bringing forth updates to the JLMBC at JLMBC's next meetings. But the main focus will be for us to try to have our initial findings, or the review committee's initial findings, at the May meeting.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 9, which is a committee report also regarding the Live Well program update from December 2021 to February 2022.
And this one is going to be introduced by Daniel Powell, who you have not met yet. So we do have, we had a vacancy when Jenny had left our division and got promoted. And Daniel Powell has been selected and has started in that position in her vacancy. Daniel's been with the Employee Benefits Division for quite some time. He just has not been with the LLL program. He worked previously with deferred compensation, and then also has worked with the HRP project, and now is going to be the manager of the Live Well program.
Thanks, Paul. I'm looking forward to meeting with everyone and working with you all. So I know this is kind of a routine report, but I'm going to highlight a few items. This report provides an overview of our Live Well activities and engagement for December and January. You can see that our December activities and communications were focused on healthy holiday eating, which I don't think I succeeded at all, but I think that's a timely communication. And you can see January was focused on starting the new year with the Live Well Step Challenge. The Step Challenge wrapped up at the end of last month, and we're going to have a follow-up report for you all, sharing the data and stats on how that went. But I did want to point out that we had increased engagement on the LiveWell website, and you'll see those stats at the top of page 3. And we think that was driven by the STEP challenge, and we're hoping to really capitalize on that engagement and pushing for more engagement for the rest of the calendar year. Before I go on, are there any questions on that?
Hi, it's Gavin. You know me, I always have questions.
That's great.
On the outreach, I'm always a little concerned because we're constantly battling, seems like this program especially, of trying to get members to participate. It's a great program, by the way. I know you posted on the website and stuff. Has there been any other thought on how we can get the word out on some of these wonderful programs that you're running? Because I'm pretty sure that some of my members don't regularly check your website and don't get updates on this stuff. Is there any thought on how we can do a greater outreach to our members on the availability of this stuff? Just a general question. Thanks.
No, that's a good question. There's been a lot of talk about it. And we've been a little short on staff, and as we staff up, I think some of those efforts will be more feasible. But in particular, we've talked about partnering with the right stakeholders. So, we could have the greatest programs in the world, most progressive, forward-thinking programs, but if we don't have the buy-in of stakeholders who have credibility with their members, so like, labor leadership, department leadership, supervisors, managers, these great programs kind of go to waste. So what we'd like to do is meet with these different stakeholders, position the programs in such a way that they meet their needs, and try to kind of really have targeted outreach and engagement. So that's something that you can you'll be hearing about from us in the coming months.
Thank you. It's just a work in progress. I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we're expecting the city to soon be a little more on site, and that will help some engagement efforts as well. So moving on, we have on page 4 a breakdown of our Zoom classes. So we have different exercise classes that are offered over Zoom. There were 48 classes in total in January, and that's about the standard number we have month to month. And 869 attendees participated in those classes. And those are really cool. I encourage you to check them out if you're interested, and we'll continue to advertise those classes. And we do participate in new hire events with departments. Lately, that's really been driven by Rec and Parks, but we'd really like to make some inroads with other departments who would like us to showcase the wellness program to their new employees. But that wraps it up for me. Are there any questions there?
Yeah, one more question. Sorry, I'm being needy today.
I appreciate it.
Paul knows he's patient with me. My question is that have we made a push on this program? Because I've discovered in my long history of labor experience, been too long, but nearing retirement. But when you hit new people coming into the room, they technically stick with the program. This is regarding safety. Many things I've dealt with through the years. When you catch them young coming in the door, they run with this stuff as building in their infrastructure of life. Have you been any push on this to push us into the new hires? And they're coming into the program when you're doing the orientation, for example, to explain this, put this in the process, because I think we could build this really more into the new hire aspect of employees, because once it's not later when it's like, oh, we discover something. You build it into the lifestyle and tools when they're coming in the door. I think we'd be more successful in the long run. I just put that out for thought. That's all.
No, that's absolutely true. And I know we had kind of a really well-oiled machine of a traveling benefits roadshow before COVID, where we would take benefits representatives from each of the different programs, take them on site to talk to new hires. And obviously that's been hurt a bit with COVID. And so, like we did these Rec and Parks new hire orientations, they're doing them remotely still. And we do encourage engagement there and encourage people to enroll in the program. But also what's important is kind of that sustained communication, because when you're a new hire, you're getting bombarded with so many different things and you have a lot of decisions to make, and you're getting acclimated to a new job. So, especially what we saw on the deferred comp side, it wasn't enough to just have that initial communication, but you really needed sustained outreach. So it's kind of all that works together.
Daniel, this is David. 2019-20, Stephen and I were working on a pilot program in the WELL program. It got suspended because of the pandemic. I want to reconvene those discussions and talk about a wellness pilot program we want to use, at least in the SEAU side. So should I reach out to you, or can you give me a call or find me? We can connect and kind of talk about what that proposal looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that.
I don't know if Stephen's gone yet, but I'd like him to be involved with at least in the initial part of it, if that's okay.
Yes, of course. We still got some time with Stephen, and we're making him work really hard the last little bit.
Okay, so I'll hopefully we can connect sometime next week or no longer than 2 weeks for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for Daniel? Okay, thank you so much, Daniel, for that informative report.
Thank you.
We will move on to item 10, which is a committee report regarding the LA Well program and activities for the same period, December 21 to January 22.
Chung, are you there? I think you're on mute, Chung.
Well, thank you. Sorry about that. I was on mute. Good morning, Good morning, JLMBC members. This is Chung with the Employee Benefits Division, and I will be going over some of the highlights from the projects and activities report for the December through February period. First up on page 1 is a update on the 2022 open enrollment period. Following the close of the open enrollment period, staff worked with LifeWorks, the benefits TPA, to review, validate, and finalize members' open enrollment elections. Since then, staff has been working with LifeWorks to plan for the next open enrollment period and to identify areas for improvement. Details regarding the 2022 open enrollment program details are provided in the LifeWorks debriefing report. Next item on page 1 through page 2 is a update on the Affordable Care Act. Staff has been working with both Ernst & Young and LifeWorks to gather the data needed to prepare the ACA 1095 forms for the 2021 tax year. Forms were completed and mailed out by the January 31st furnishment deadline. Since then, staff has issued a RFP in February for ACA services. The RFP is seeking firms who can provide the city with continuing ACA reporting and compliance services for tax years 2022 through 2024. Next up is just a quick update on the new hire benefits presentation. During the months of November and January, staff did participate in several new hire benefit presentations to the Rec and Parks Department. Presentation did include a wellness presentation as well. And lastly, on page 3 is a quick staffing update. In addition to Daniel's appointment, we are pleased to report that Brianna Collins and Isela Gerardo both accepted a promotion within the Employee Benefits Division. They both previously were working to support the member services and direct billing sections. And unfortunately, we also have to report one departure. Kaya Moore, one of our benefits specialists, has accepted a promotion with Lacers. And with that, this brings the report to a close. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Going once, going twice. Questions for Mr. Tran? Okay. Thank you so much for that informative report. Moving on to the concluding items. Do we have any requests for future agenda items? Okay, hearing none. Moving on to the next meeting dates. We have a meeting on March 17th, 2022, which is a special meeting. Following that, April 7th, 2022, a regular meeting. And then in and then in May on the 5th, 2022, another regular meeting. Okay, so the time now is 10:25, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.